This is the second new legendary banner character to drop and was a complete surprise as there was no advertising, no trailer, no drip marketing, anything mentioning Rossi-11's presence. So it's easy to assume that that's because he's not that good. After all, Umiko got really good billing during the Estella banner, and she's hands down one of the best heroes in the game, so if they're not pushing Rossi just as hard, it must mean that there's nothing here, right? Well, wrong. Let's talk about Rossi-11. Rossi-11 is an arc defense character whose relic utilizes arc threads to encapsulate and damage enemies. His kit mostly revolves around trapping enemies, shielding allies, and generating overshield. His weapons of choice allow him to combat piercing and rapid-fire Shinkas, as his weapon sets are bows and crossbows. So if you've been working on a Mahamayuri for Ningfei, it'll be a really good fit here. The gameplay loop revolves around using your first signature ability to pull and gather enemies for CC, before following up with the second ability throwing threads into those enemies and generating overshield. In terms of his super, Rossi summons a giant barrier that absorbs projectile damage from enemies. In a nutshell, that pretty well describes the majority of his kit. But let's take a look into the abilities on a holistic scale and talk about passives, talents, and skills. Rossi-11's relic is called Marionette, and it takes the form of an arc loom located on his back. Rossi's passive is Ionic Protection, which states when any of his abilities hit targets, they grant 1 point of passive energy up to a maximum of 9 points. Passive energy is then converted into overshields at a rate of 1 to 148 every 2 seconds for 6 seconds. His signature 1 is Arc Cage, where Rossi throws an arc orb forward. Once it collides with an enemy or terrain, it pulls enemies in and inflicts confined on nearby targets, then generates an arc cage that blocks incoming projectiles. More on this ability later. His signature 2 is Thread Flow, which when triggered, launches an arc thread dealing damage to combatants it hits and grants an overshield to Rossi. His ultimate is Photoelectric Gate, where Rossi builds a gate in front of him that blocks all incoming projectile damage. Pressing the super button again after it's been deployed will launch the gate forward, dealing damage to combatants. This is honestly a really cool ability and, believe it or not, very useful. More on that later too. Moving on, Rossi's skills are Pulling Strings, Ion Accumulator, and Deep Sea Breathing. Pulling Strings allows Thread Flow to overpenetrate combatants, while Ion Accumulator causes Rossi to generate 1 additional passive energy when his Photoelectric Gate takes damage. Lastly, Deep Sea Breathing states when Rossi's health is below 50%, gaining an overshield will also heal Rossi for 50% of the overshield's health. Lastly is his weapon mastery, Ionic Cascade. Ionic Cascade states that whenever Ionic Protection performs an energy conversion, it will also grant Rossi's bow and crossbow 1 stack of weave up to a maximum of 3 stacks. When shots hit targets, they consume 1 stack of weave to generate a lightning strike, dealing arc damage to combatants within a 2-meter radius. At level 4, it also adds the effect of instantly triggering Ionic Protection when crossbow shots hit, consuming passive energy to grant overshield and instantly converting it into an Ionic Cascade lightning strike. Since Rossi is a legendary, I'd also like to talk about his tree. At present, I haven't maxed it out yet, unfortunately, but I do have up to his T2, and I've playtested that so far. His T1 is called Arc Ripple, that states when the Thread Flow passes through the Arc Cage, it activates Arc Cage to trigger an Arc Explosion, dealing 1,850 arc damage to combatants in a 6-meter radius, though this effect can only be triggered once per use of Thread Flow. His T2 is called Liberating Melody, which states that casting Thread Flow grants allies within a 10-meter radius an overshield equal to 50% of Rossi's overshield, lasting for 6 seconds. His T3 improves his Ionic Protection to increase the health provided from 50 to 100% of his overshield. His T4 gives his Photoelectric Gate 50% increased movement speed and damage. His T5 gives Arc Cage a 100% health increase. And lastly, his T6 states that when an Arc Cage or Photoelectric Gate is present, the number of threads launched by Thread Flow will be increased to 6. In terms of artifacts, my current setup is Ring of Abundance for additional potency to healing and overshields received, Binging Planetismal for health restoration when signature abilities are cast, Inverted Fury for bonus damage while shielded, and Bellicose Planetismal for additional weapon damage after casting abilities. There are other options. For example, since this kit is so good about generation of overshields, you could specialize in that department and run something like Bulwark Evolution to grant damage resistance paired with Ring of Safeguarding, Ring of Courage, and Ring of Vengeance. But my ideal build for Rossi will be Ring of Abundance, Ring of Safeguarding, Inverted Fury, and either Inverted Vengeance, Bellicose Planetismal, or Confined Axiom. which is a new relic that makes enemies take greater long-range weapon damage from the wielder while they're confined. For artifact traits, you really want to aim for signature boost, ability strength, overshield boost, and arc boost as your traits. Okay, we've covered his kit and his relics. Let's talk about weapons. There are only two options in the bow department. Both are arc, one is exotic. Let's go over the mythic options first, then we'll circle back to the exotics later. Yoshimoto is the only mythic bow currently in the game. It's an arc damage bow with a 544 draw time. It's got solid perks in both columns, but the ideal combination here is obviously Archer's Tempo and Ensured Yields. Archer's Tempo is going to let you draw the shots faster after precision hits, and Ensured Yields will grant your next arrow 60% damage after shooting if you net a kill, and 35% damage if you don't. It's more or less basically a free 35% flat damage bonus for every arrow past the initial first one you fire, so if you get the perk upgrade to Ensured Yields as well, it'll also buff reload speed by 30% when you don't get a kill, making it an even more potent perk against majors and ultras. In the heavy slot, there are two options. First and foremost, you've got the Hone Ibex, which is an arc crossbow with a 414 fire rate, and the Saizo Solar Crossbow, which is a 456 fire rate crossbow. Neither is honestly fantastic, as Mahama Yuri exists, but if we're talking perks, the Hone has a clear advantage over the Saizo. The Saizo has Trinklater, Solidarity, and Fire Rush in Column 1, and Eager Aspirant, Glutton, and Hyperemia in Column 2. Of all the perks I would want on this thing, Fire Rush and Hyperemia are the clear frontrunners. Hit legendary perks like Overflow and Subsistence in Column 1 are also present good options. Switching over to the Hone, it offers Surrounded, Fraternity, and Annihilation in Column 1, and Black Body, Reincarnation, and Syncopation in Column 2. Annihilation is really solid, as is Fraternity. And honestly, if we're being completely honest, Surrounded isn't that bad of a choice either. Though of the three, it's the more situational one. Column 2 is really where things start to kind of fall away though, because there's one specific perk that exists on the gun, Syncopation. Syncopation is just a goated perk in general, if we're being completely honest, and out of all 12 available mythic perks across both crossbows, it's by and large probably the best one available. It states that every 4th round deals 280% damage, and it also has the bonus of ensuring every 4th round is a guaranteed precision hit if you've got the corresponding exotic mod as well. Now that we've talked about the mythic options, let's talk about the exotic ones. There are two options here. Mahama Yuri in the heavy slot, and Trinity Ghoul in the primary slot. Mahama Yuri is an extremely good crossbow. It's no exaggeration to state it's the best crossbow in the game, bar none, and is to Ning Fei what Smart Bomb is to Wolf. However, though it's really good, it's not likely where you should put your time for Rossi. Rossi's kit really plays into the arc fantasy, and the AoE damage Trinity Ghoul adds with the Lightning Rod perk and its Split Electron perk are just too good when paired with Rossi's kit. This is even further amplified by Ghoul's C1, which allows the Lightning Rod perk to trigger from any final blow with the weapon or arc abilities. Then its C2 grants it the ability to extend Lightning Rod with precision hits, letting it score up to an additional 2 times, with precision kills resetting that number entirely. C3 isn't even all that important if we're being honest, as it only nets you a 25% increase to chain lightning damage, so this bow doesn't even have the issue that a lot of other exotics do, where the C3 feels mandatory to make the bow viable in in-game, which is a major plus. My recommended loadout is obviously Trinity Ghoul and a Hone with Syncopation, but if you decide to go the other way instead, the Yoshimoto we discussed earlier with a Mahama Yuri works really well as well. That's actually what I've been running right now. Alright, that's a complete breakdown of Rossi-11, but how is the character overall? Well, he's really good. Being flexible enough to cover piercing and rapid-fire Shinkas with his weapon sets is already nice, but his near-constant uptime on overshields give him a nice survivability factor, and he has support abilities as a sustain unit since he also passes his shields to his teammates. The bow is a good range weapon for him, and for closer engagements, the crossbow serves its purpose well. In terms of light link companions, Janwei's max shield boost, and either Kabir's 5% arc boost or Yolder's damage reduction when health is 50% or below work really well here. I personally lean towards Yolder and Janwei, as my playtime has had the free DR really come in clutch when enemies are tearing away my overshields. His play loop is pretty passive, and it really works well for players of pretty much all skill levels. The more you build your character around shields, the more payoff you'll get. If I was to point out one specific issue with Rossi, it would be that his shields don't last very long. But you'll still regain overshield over time as long as you don't flub your abilities and build up your passive energy stacks. His shields are useful and versatile, making for a pretty potent combo as a support and defense character. Using Arc Cage can imprison enemies and make them take more damage from your thread flow, but it can also be used as a mini safety net too. There have been times I've tossed it out and used it as a mini bubble to block enemy projectiles by stepping inside. In the current strike, the pit for example, I can also use it to trap the boss so his void beams don't suppress the team. Granted, on Grandmaster difficulty and likely in Calamity Ops, the barrier wouldn't be able to take as much of a beating without attaining his skill tree talents. But it's a part of his playstyle that's really a boon to the team. His constant uptime on his overshields also ensures allies within 10 meters are also shielded from some damage. I played a Grandmaster with an Umiko and an Atal and it went decently smooth, all things considered. I finished that up as MVP playing Rossi as well, just as a side note. A majority of his damage doesn't come from his super like some other characters. It's a combination of his kit's interplay that results in high DPS output while crunching on defensive capabilities to keep your team alive. His shield still does a pretty respectable amount of damage when it's thrown out as well. Against the Forgotten Bounty Shinka Servitor squad, I managed to score nearly 500,000 damage just from pushing the shield out. For context, Umiko's Singularity Shuriken scored around 624,628, but there's a lot of things to consider in that equation too, as her super is a one-shot super while Rossi's acts as a defensive barrier for a while before it actually needs to be thrown. There's also the fact that my Umiko is T6, and her T4 boosts her Singularity Shuriken's direct and Singularity damage by 25% each. So when I manage to get Rossi to T4, I can test again, and I believe the margins will be somewhat closer. So what's all of this mean? What's my final verdict on Rossi, his kit, and his place in the meta? I love Rossi. In fact, I may be maining him for a while. He's got team support capabilities, defense through most of his abilities, a respectable amount of offense in his kit, and his weapon varieties are useful in letting him deal with two types of Shinkas as well as two different combat situations, distance with bow and medium close range with crossbow. His kit interplays well with his available weapon selections, and honestly, he's a really versatile character. Mileage may vary depending on playstyle, but his ability to CC enemies is comparable to Ikora, but his follow-up feels way more powerful to me. Not to mention the boost it gives to his primary and heavy weapons, which can help him really pump out the DPS. Will Rossi be the absolute best DPS in the game? No. He's not really supposed to be though, but he can be a really reliable overshield generator, CC, and shielder for your team while doing respectable damage. I highly recommend checking him out and building him if his playstyle is of interest to you. I personally enjoy it, so expect to see him in a lot of my videos going forward. Try him out and let me know what you think. Comment down below, and hey, if you like this type of content, I am constantly making videos like this, so you should subscribe. It took me a while to figure out, but I finally got her nailed down, so I'll be doing a Helhest video next, and with Duet Night Abyss right around the corner, I guarantee there's a lot of content incoming on this channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.